Welcome to Body Kindness. I'm Rebecca Scritchfield, creator of the Body Kindness philosophy, book, and audiobook. I'm here to help you create a better life by reinventing health from the body oppressive, shaming, and you'll never be enough type of mindset to positive and joyful ways that you can spiral up your energy, mood, and your well-being at any size, shape, or weight, and as you are right now. Get started for free at bodykindnessbook.com/start. That's the sound of me smashing a stack of scales in front of some friends. And I have to say that breaking up with the scale and all the other ways I was judging, monitoring, and measuring my worth was absolutely pivotal in my life. Creating the body kindness philosophy and letting myself be a human being again helped me become a better mom, a better clinician, and a happier and healthier person. I believe we all have a right to decide how we want to care for ourselves, and I think we all need support in figuring out what that looks like. You don't have to do this alone. There's a whole community of like-minded people who are fed up with diets, who are embracing intuitive eating, and who are completely redefining their lives from body shame to body kindness. You are not broken. Our culture is. Find your inner caregiver and create a better life with body kindness.
We can have all the best intentions, but what is the impact of those intentions? And I feel like this essay nails that idea of these two terms and what they really mean. So it's well-intentioned that we tell people to love their bodies, to be body positive, X, Y, Z, all this stuff. But the impact is that you're then policing people's feelings about their own lived experience. And the impact is you value some bodies and some people over others.
That was Kelly Jensen. Kelly is an editor of books for young adults, including Body Talk, 37 Voices Explore Our Radical Anatomy, out August 18th. Also, the award-winning Don't Call Me Crazy, 33 Voices Start the Conversation About Mental Health. And Here We Are, Feminism for the Real World. She works full-time as an editor for Book Riot, and in her free time, she teaches yoga and volunteers for a senior pet rescue. She's a former librarian and lifelong lover of books and reading. Her Instagram handle is Hey Kelly Jensen, and she has a Venmo, Kelly B. Jensen, and she said she would love for folks to buy the book. That's more valuable than cash to her. But if you are getting something out of this show and would like to offer a tip or donation her way, again, it's on Venmo, Kelly B. Jensen, and you can find the link to her social handle website where she teaches yoga and Venmo on the show notes for this episode. I was so honored to talk to Kelly about her latest book. We had a very interesting conversation about our experiences with our bodies and societally things that kind of get messed up when we try to kind of tell people how they should feel at all times. A lot of interesting conversation on a particular essay who I can't wait to introduce you to. Her name is Patricia Elzie, and she writes about some conflicting emotions she has, interestingly, around our feelings being policed, and how that relates to what we do with our bodies and changes in our bodies, et cetera. So I really hope you enjoy the show, and please consider picking up the book. It's available wherever books are sold. Hey, Kelly, welcome to Body Kindness.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, this is such a treat to get to meet you and talk to you. I'm holding in my hand your latest book. It's called Body Talk, 37 Voices Explore Our Radical Anatomy. And so this is a book that you edited, and it's got lots of people in it, including, world famous names like Tyra Banks and Allie Reisman and Julie Murphy. And so I was excited just to see that on the cover, but really digging in and reading these powerful, beautiful essays. It was really inspiring and emotional for me as a mom. I have two young girls, 6 and 7, and I even started reading parts of the book from them to them, and it really helped to open up conversation. So I'm really thrilled that it's here and out in the world, and I'm so grateful that we're going to get to chat a lot about this book and what people can get as a benefit. But before we delve into that, I always like to give listeners an opportunity to learn more about my guests. So I would love for you to share a little bit more about who you are and what you do in the world.
Sure. First, I want to say thank you. I am so excited about this book. I am a full-time editor for the book website Book Riot, and I've been doing that for 6 years now. Prior to that, I worked as a teen librarian, which is where I found this passion for nonfiction for teenagers specifically. At the time that I was in libraries, a lot of the nonfiction for teens was not great. It was very much, I always called them the report books. So they're the books that the kids needed to write their reports, 100 pages, 200 pages, like whatever the minimum was, covered a topic, in and out. Nothing wrong with those, but there wasn't anything for leisure reading. And that was so sad to me as somebody who loves nonfiction and who knows just how incredible the field of adult nonfiction is. And so when I left libraries and I was thinking about how I could still connect with young people, it hit me that this was sort of that perfect spot to work toward adding conversation to teen nonfiction that would be relatable, that would be discussable, that would be easy to pick up and put down, and that would also introduce readers to these big things that they care so deeply about, but don't necessarily talk about openly or are afraid to talk about, and to do so through some of the most interesting and compelling writers and artists who are out there doing work. So that's sort of my career history there. The other side is I also teach yoga, which I've been doing now for, I think, 4 years. And it has been such an important part of my mental well-being as well as my physical well-being. Like my relationship with both my body and my mind changed completely as I started doing yoga. And I don't just mean that by terms of like poses. I mean that in the whole of what yoga is, the whole of what it brings to one's mental well-being, as well as to just the way you live your life and the philosophies that kind of underpin every decision you make, every thought you make, and understanding just what it is you bring to the world and what it is you are to take from the world around you.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you brought up yoga. It was something I noticed from your Instagram, and I really appreciate that you're a yoga teacher. Are you teaching online, or are there videos? Like if somebody wanted to experience your yoga teaching, is there a way that they could do that?
Yeah, I teach right now with COVID. We're finally kind of back into studios, but we're still offering virtual yoga, which is awesome. It's nice to be able to offer that hybrid for folks who are ready to leave the house as well as those who aren't. But even more than that, I think the thing that makes virtual yoga, this hybrid model, so great is that people who would otherwise struggle to even get to a yoga class have it available to them. As they don't have to travel anywhere. They don't have to plan for it. It's like they're at home. It's 5:30. Well, I could take a yoga class now, and I don't have to, pack my bag. I don't have to do X and Y and Z to even get out the door. And so that's to say, I teach twice a week. on Tuesday nights and Wednesday nights. And all of my classes that I offer, you can find on my website. Or if you search on Facebook for Whole Life Yoga with Kelly, that's my yoga page, and I post all my classes there.
Okay, great. I will definitely include the link to your Whole Life Kelly on Facebook in the show notes. And what's your website?
It's kellybjensen.com.
Okay, so I'll include that to the show notes as well. And everything you said about yoga, I was like shaking my head. Yes, this was my path too. And I feel very fortunate. My first encounter with yoga was really what I credit deeply to helping me to heal my relationship with myself. And like I would say, yoga helped me heal my body image. And I think there were certain things about it, like I entered in this classroom that didn't have mirrors even. And I literally remember, hold yourself with compassion. And I'm like Googling what's compassion? Like, oh, isn't this a gift? But same thing. It's like, I went to yoga thinking like, oh yeah, strength, flexibility. And I think asana is the way we find it. But for those who I think yoga can be for everyone, but I hear two things. One is like, nah, that ain't hard enough, and I'm like, okay, and again, sometimes that's someone who's working with their relationship to movement still, or just, I don't know, hasn't had enough of an openness to it. And then I would say the other one that people, and it's similar for meditation. They say, I can't meditate. They're like, I can't do yoga because I can't relax. Right. And it's so interesting because my second wave of how yoga saved me it was a little over a year ago. And I broke out in all these skin rashes and I went to the doctor and she's like, this is anxiety. And she grabbed my phone. She's like, these devices are killing people. And she's like, I could see Rebecca coming here like a tornado. And, anyway, she's like, when's the last time you did yoga? And I was just like in tears because I was like, she's not wrong. And obviously I thankfully got meds because I needed meds to clear up my rashes.
Sure. Yeah.
My body was just saying like, yep. And I remember even thinking, what? I'd be crying. I'd be like, what is this? I don't feel depressed. It's not depression. And the fact that I wasn't like even thinking about anxiety was also really, I think, very telling, right? Anyway, I also agree that if you are open to yoga, like be willing to try different things in different communities, because there's an issue with the welcomeness of the spaces.
For sure. Yeah.
If you've been mistreated by somebody or even a teacher who their intention was not to harm, but they created harm. In the most basic sense, if you're able to breathe, you are able to do yoga. And there's just so much good, right? About how it literally strengthens your interoceptive awareness, which links, to just sensing when you're tired and really need sleep, even though you're avoiding life's worries with extra television, right? So anything from that to just, this kindness and willingness to, I want to be your friend. At least for me, the paths that I found through yoga led me to that. And I've had moments where it's like, woo, let's see if I can stand on my head today, and then moments of like, I really need a child's pose. And I think there's a beauty there too. So
I always tell my students that I want them to walk away with a toolkit of things that they can pull from in moments where they just need to breathe or they need to step away and take a few minutes for themselves. And that, if it's something fancy, ask themselves why it is they need that fancy pose. Sometimes that's what their body wants, and that's great. Other times it's ego calling, and that in and of itself is worth questioning. I had this great experience yesterday with one of my students as I was teaching, and we finished class and she said something to the effect of, I get so mad at myself because I get right and left wrong all the time. I don't understand how I'm a functioning adult and I don't know right from left. And I said, well, does it really matter? And she paused and she was like, it doesn't. And it was one of those moments where I was like, so we did all those poses. We did an hour of class. We sweat, like we breathed, we did all that. But really the yoga is right the second when you just realize that this thing that you have been really beating yourself up over isn't worth that energy. And she walked out of that class feeling so much better. And I thought, you know what, if that's all she got out of this, like that is a tremendous amount to get out of a yoga class. And so I always like to give people the tools, show them how to use those tools, and then integrate those tools into their own life off the mat. Like on the mat is for the tool giving, off is where you really put it into action.
And what a beautiful, lesson on non-judgment, right? Right or left. Like, we don't need to judge this, very human mistake, but then also a beautiful lesson about asking if something's helpful. That comes up a lot in counseling where, a client might say something that is true and they struggle with the fact that it's true when they want to challenge, it's like, well, I can't challenge if this is true. And I was like, well, what about the question? Is this helpful? Because not everything is helpful. And it's like epiphany from there. So yeah, not necessarily helpful to, sure, notice, curious, true self energy and non-judgment, your inner caregiver might say, oh, isn't this interesting? I mix up my right and lefts.
Yeah.
Giggle, right? There's that noticing without judgment and shame. And you were able to help her let go of that struggle with kind of, I got this thing wrong, so she could use her energy somewhere else. And I 100% agree with there's the practice, but the practice is also, it shows up as a tool in life too.
Yep.
It's so beautiful. All right. Well, I really want to dig into this book. And my first question for you is like, I would love to know the backstory. Like what led to this book, Body Talk?
So I wanted to do a body book, and I had done, my first anthology was on feminism. My second was on mental health. And so the third, to me, body, it was a thing I needed to do. It's something I've always been passionate about. And I feel like I finally reached the point in everything I've learned about bodies, and I mean that both on the physical level, the emotional level, the political level. I feel like I finally was at the point that I could do this because I didn't want to create a book that was all body positive. And certainly that comes through in the book. And that I think is a theme easily seen throughout the book. But I wanted this to also be a book that people could turn to and relate to, whether or not they have experienced these particular challenges. Having a book with 37 different people talking about the various challenges they've experienced, the thoughts they've had about their body, I feel like is an incredible tool for anybody who has a body to be like, oh, I'm not the only person who's had that thought or that worry or that fear. And that it's also okay to acknowledge that, to feel those feelings, to think about these things, and then also realize that that is one state of being, that there are other options available too in terms of acceptance, in terms of becoming an activist, becoming aware of how much of what we feel about our own particular bodies is something that has been sold to us as opposed to something that is inherent to us. And the contributors just brought their best for this collection. And I could not be happier with the stories they shared. And it was a very human book to work on.
Yeah, I agree with you. Your contributors really delivered. And I 100% believe that everybody will see themselves in likely several essays. And also, I enjoyed reading essays where I didn't see myself because it helped me learn and grow and like be a better human. And that's a strong core value. So you kind of get both, right? I get to see myself and I get to see, other people and, learn and respect our common humanity too.
Many of the essays talk about this idea that people stare when somebody is different. And I like to think this is the book where people ask the questions that they're too afraid to ask when they're staring at somebody. And that person finally gets to have the opportunity to tell their story and to get it out there and share it the way that they want to share it, so that somebody is looking at them going, oh, they're a person. Here's an interesting thing about them, or here's a challenge that they struggle with. And they no longer need to stare. Instead, they have compassion and understanding, and understand that we all come from this same place of being a human with a body that we're trying to navigate through a million different things that are holding us back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm picking up on a couple threads, in thinking in terms of your hopes for the book. And you had mentioned about some sort of phrase about, like, I don't know if you said like little activists, or like becoming an activist, or engaging in activism. So that's, we're talking political, social, systemic, structural change, which is very important, outside of the individual experiences.
Yes.
And, for real, liberation and freedom. And of course, around bodies, but even beyond that. And then just what you were talking about in an individual sense. And so to have more compassion, recognize our common humanity, and just be, who doesn't want to be a kinder, more compassionate human? And especially if you carry multiple privileges like I do, you certainly would like to be able to find ways where you can do your own learning. And I think books like this one, right, that include essays and the lived experiences from the people directly, are some of the best places to learn. It's a way where you can learn in private and research more, and then carry on conversations with others to help them learn and grow as well.
For sure. And I like to think too, in an anthology like this, you find people whose voices really connect with you, whether or not you are relating to them or not. And then you have the opportunity to go see what else they've written. And chances are many of them have written about similar topics. And it's like suddenly your knowledge and your understanding has just expanded beyond this book, which is already, I hope, open your mind up. And then suddenly it's like you see it everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And I will be the first to admit that when I was choosing through how I was going to focus or what I was going to bring up, and I was like, okay, I read an essay and be like, where are they on Instagram? Are they on Twitter? And so it really is, there's a wealth of ways to be able to connect and expand. And it's just really so helpful. Like I said, I'm so glad to have it out in the world. And I have to say, I love the way that you decided to organize the book. I wanted to give listeners just kind of a bit of a tour. So there are 6 different chapters. And so after the introduction, there are 6 chapters, and they're all themed out into a topic area, which I think is really interesting. So for example, Chapter 1, head, shoulders, knees, and toes. There are essays about scoliosis, spinal fusion, and stomach punches. And that's by Rachel Lippincott. And then there's an essay on the politics of hair by Geraldine M. Thomas. And so you've got a chapter organized by a theme, several essays in each chapter, and then also like really important, I don't know if fun is the right description, but how you pull out the FAQs. So in chapter 1, it's like, well, what are the best terms to use for disabled people? And to your point about that, there's really useful information as far as between person first language and how like some people might think that is what is preferred, but you should ask the community because in what I learned from reading it is that in terms of disability, when you use person first, it makes it seem like the disability is a disadvantage or a negative, and that's actually part of the problem. So you throughout the book, use the FAQs as a way to I feel like your effort was, I want to do my best to set the record straight, and these even aren't going to be perfect. I just wonder a little bit about the decisions, how to organize the book and to put FAQs in there. And did you know kind of call outs? What were you thinking when you were thinking of organizing?
So I knew as I was editing pieces, what might be valuable to include. And part of that is just having this holistic look at what is going to be in the book and what might not be there or what might be touched upon that could be expanded a bit. And so that's where I started. And then I did a little bit of asking around. I asked people I knew, like, if you were 14 years old, what is something you would want to know about your body that you know now or wish you had known then? And got some really great feedback about that. And then some of them were just things that were important to me or that I've thought about or that kind of get overlooked in the scope of talking about our bodies. So, an example of that is talking about the difference between the fat acceptance movement and body positivity, as well as the idea of the pink tax. People hear these words, but what do they mean? And then some are just straight nerdy, like, I have a number of tattoos. I think they're so cool. And I was like, I know teenagers love tattoos, like, but how do they work? How does it actually stay in your skin? You've seen the art, you know it does, but like, what is the science behind that? So, those are really great opportunities to offer just bite-sized information without a whole narrative around it. And I utilized incredible resources for some of these FAQs specifically to get insight where I didn't have insight. So I have invisible and chronic illnesses, but I'm not disabled in the way that is traditionally viewed as disabled. So I reached out to a woman who is very outspoken about disability. And I was like, hey, would you be willing to read this and give me feedback or see if there's something I'm missing? And they were all in. And that was so incredible to know that there's also this whole team of advocates who want to make sure that the information that goes out to people is correct and that it's been, I don't want to say vetted, but somebody who actually has these lived experiences has had input and can gently correct if you're incorrect or add context that you simply just don't know when you don't live that experience.
Well, I'm so excited to hear you bring up about tattoos because that was the first part that I started reading to my girls because they are all about like, I mean, how things work and the human body and why is this and that. And my brother has tattoos. And so, and I remember them asking me about his tattoos before, and I just said, yeah, it's like art for your body. And, people choose to express themselves. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh, girls, I'm going to read you a little bit more about tattoos. And then we were looking at YouTube videos and just having all these interesting conversations. And so that was one of the ways that I kind of started to have these bite-sized conversations with them, was just through these just wonderful summaries of issues that matter. And the pink tax, we definitely read that. Is this fair? No, and so just as a parent, I think sometimes we, like, what's the right age? And are they too young? I mean, I really think that we do too much kind of self-censoring.
Yes.
Especially with information and technology. Like, I really can't say there's ever a time when someone is too young. I mean, when my younger daughter, she's 6 now, but when she was 2, she loves being naked. But when she was 2, I saw her sitting there one day, like just playing with herself on the floor. And I was like, hey, honey, does that feel good? And she could not even talk. She was just noticing her body. But definitely she has been early and just noticing her body and even being just to be able to say that we have this trust that oh yeah. And she'll ask me sometimes, can you take a picture? And I'll take a picture and show it to her. And I made a full commitment of like, I'm not going to give it a hoo-ha name or whatever, that they are going to see the parts and they're going to know words like labia and vagina and vulva and even clitoris, and even my commitment to doing that was just through my own the ways that I've learned that my needs weren't met and through culture and society. And you have a whole section on like sexual health and body shame that I thought was awesome and sort of like exactly like you were saying, why we need to be able to talk about things. So anyway, what I really hope that any parent who is listening, I mean, what ages would you say, oh, for sure, like, this would be great to have in the school libraries. Parents, if you want to get a gift for your kid, or a niece or nephew or whoever, right? That this is an ideal range, but also empower, like, get this for yourself. And you can look through and see how it could lead to conversations.
I always say 12 and up is sort of my rule of thumb, but I say that with the caveat that ties into what you said about self-censorship. Having worked with young people, I know how different they all are in terms of what they're ready for and what they're curious about, as well as when they know they're not ready for something or don't totally grasp it the first time, but it sparks their curiosity. So I always say 12 and up, knowing that there will be younger people who are super ready for it and will skip the parts that they don't get or aren't relevant to them. And they might come back to it again when they're 16, 17, 18, and suddenly they understand things they didn't understand before. So I think especially if you're a parent or a teacher or a librarian and you work with young people, you'll know exactly what in here will totally light them up and where they'll also just stop themselves. There's nothing in here that will be shameful or surprising, or I don't want to say off-putting, because it's a conversation about bodies. We all have them. And so it's just a matter of what a young person is ready for, and they know that, and you know that.
Right. I agree 100%.
Let's take a quick pause from this conversation for an important message from Bernie Salazar.
Hey listeners, Bernie Salazar here, asking you to support our show. Make your contribution at gofundme.com/bodykindness, and 100% of any amount you can give goes to offset the production expenses. If 20 people can donate $25, it pays for this episode. Again, that's gofundme.com/bodykindness to chip in and support our show. We're so grateful to have you as a listener, and we thank you for your support.
So I found myself, literally, if I could, I would just narrate the book, this whole conversation, because all the essays are so good. But obviously we want everyone to go out and buy the book and buy books as gifts and, and support this wonderful work. But I do hope that we could delve a little bit into chapter 3, the theme of cosmic forms.
Sure.
Because I there's one essay in particular I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely want to read from here. But the whole section is really, for me, it's a delight because I think it hits the mark of what culture needs to be talking about now. And so in your summary section, you talk about the terms body positivity and fat positivity, and about, there is value in loving your body. And there's value in discussing, expressing, and celebrating your body shape and size. And also acknowledging that it can be work to, this idea of practicing body acceptance, right? And it is not an effortless thing. And I think that when we're only telling that sort of happy ending end result, it's kind of like, oh, well, that person has it figured out. It almost has a disadvantage because we don't get to see the messy middle or the struggle or unfinished stories about, I'm still in process. And, and I think it's really important, also to have conversations about what the process is like, and lots of opportunities for nuance in this conversation around bodies and our relationship with our bodies. So I wanted to highlight Julie Murphy's essay on 50 swimsuits. She's what a wonderful writer. It's such an honest essay just about this innocent little girl in her hand-me-down swimsuit that she just loves, right? And then to the point to where, oh yeah, I forgot my suit, wink, wink, put her ankles in the pool because she actually didn't want to be in a bathing suit because of the ways that culture harmed her. And so it really is something I think a lot of people can relate to. I mean, it's getting better, but we could go on and on about what sizes do bathing suits come in, and can they please be pretty and cute? And even it being revolutionary that they made, bikinis for, like higher weight people. It's like, these are like recent changes. And so of course there's going to be a lot of difficulty and shame around it. One of the things I also appreciated in her honesty was talking about some internalized fat phobia that she had. And she even used the word disgusted. And, that it was part of her healing was to actually wrestle with that. And she even said, if I could just read a short paragraph, I hesitate to say I've learned to love my body. Loving my body is a new challenge every day. And sometimes I succeed while other times I don't. But since I've been making a conscious effort to love my body. So I really value that she's talking about an effort you put into this practice as opposed to an ephemeral state of, I will always love myself. Right. And then she says, I've had the great fortune of reintroducing myself to so many things I loved as a child that were taken from me as I grew up. And I just love that so much.
I love this essay, and I love pairing it with the essay afterward. So Patricia Elzie's essay is one I think about all the time because it really shifted a lot of my own thinking as she talked about this. And her essay is about body positivity and learning to love your body and how that's all good and great and worthy and covers these same exact things that Julie talks about. But she talks about what happens when we get to the point where we're policing people's feelings about their bodies, when we're saying things like, you should love your body, or you should do this. And where do we do more harm than good when it comes to helping people practice self-acceptance?
I'm so glad you brought this up because in my notes, I put Patricia S. Elzie, Arrow, sells this book for me. I did not know her before this book, and I'm now following her everywhere. I love this essay. So good. So for folks who also don't know her, so she is a queer Black woman, and she lives with her wife who's transgender. And I think that's relevant for the terms of the essay, because we're talking about multiple intersecting identities that carry lots of oppression in our cultures. And because really like at a high level, she hits on social justice, intersectionality, body autonomy. And like the note I took was, I felt like it was characterizing like belonging, right? Like who gets to decide who belongs and where? And almost like you said, to do more harm than good in this sense of communities, right? And she talks about very human, messy emotions and the need to feel, right? Even if it doesn't follow a certain group's values or their rules. And oh my gosh, I have to quote, I laughed out loud. I've got to quote something about RuPaul. Okay, here it is.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Sometimes we don't love our bodies, and I'm fed up with being told by everyone from RuPaul to Brene Brown that our capacity to love others depends on our ability to love ourselves. I'm done with the messages that I must love my body to achieve some kind of completeness, freedom, or happiness.
Yes.
And I was like, yes. And I laughed when I saw that because, if you had to do a spectrum, right, I would put RuPaul and Brene Brown on those ends, right? And it's like, you're so right. We kind of catch a message and then repeat it flatly in a tweet or in an Instagram post. And it's almost like duplicating each other's stuff. And it can get to the point of being really, really unhelpful. And yeah, I really wanted to acknowledge, like as a white woman with thin privilege, cis het, all the advantages, that you could think of, economic advantage and education, financial stability, and a person, right, who wrote a book called Body Kindness, and, you know, and it's just like kind of in holding this space for like, yay, be good to yourself, right? And it doesn't discredit any of that. It's also a heck of a lot easier for me to say and do. And so what she mentions in this essay is that many of the voices in the body positivity movement, though well-intentioned, suffer from a lack of nuance and intersectionality. And then in reference to Sonia Renee Taylor, whose Body is Not an Apology book is amazing. All Sonia's work is amazing. Her voice, however, seems to be an anomaly in this sea of white feminist voices talking about fat positivity disguised as body positivity. I say it is disguised as body positivity because it is so often fat centric. And there was something so magical about reading this. I'm so glad that in writing it, it kind of came up twice, because it would be almost natural to hear body positivity as the one that is being like disguised and cloaked, right? You know, and she's flipping it, right? As just like, and to your point, there is a difference between body positivity and fat activism, and both have merits. And I think what is also really powerful about what she's trying to say is that there are, she talks about odd lines being drawn as far as body modifications, in which that's why I highlighted the body autonomy, because for me, I was like, wait a minute, nobody can tell anybody what to do with their body, and I would even own like to that, like I am not involved in the work that supports people in doing intentional weight loss practices, right? But I would never say, oh, this person, you're a bad person for pursuing intentional weight loss, or choosing anything to do with your body because it's yours. And it's such a privilege to even kind of hammer that message out. And people can do that sometimes. So yeah, like I would just love to talk a little bit more about like the nuance in the value that you see of what this essay can teach us about where we need, those of us who care about these movements, like where do we need to be holding space and opening up our minds?
Well, I think a big thing we can do is to continue to listen to people like Patricia, who are pointing out from lived experiences at multiple intersections about what they're seeing from those of us who are privileged and why those messages can be so harmful, even if they're well-intentioned. So I'm sure that this has been brought up here before, and it's certainly shown up throughout any social activism place, especially recently, is this idea of intent versus impact. And we can have all the best intentions, but what is the impact of those intentions? And I feel like this essay nails that idea of these two terms and what they really mean. So it's well-intentioned that we tell people to love their bodies, to be body positive, X, Y, Z, all this stuff. But the impact is that you're then policing people's feelings about their own lived experience. And the impact is you value some bodies and some people over others. Again, not the intent, but it's the impact. And the more we listen to people who are talking about these things, I think that's where the work is. And I think it's amplifying those voices and keeping ours out of it, because it's so easy for especially white women, especially cis white women, to be like, but that's not what I meant. And certainly it's not, but the impact is still there.
Yeah. And I also think that there's this really important conversation that she brings up about changes that happened in her body in her essay. And so, like, if I could just read a brief part from it. And I'm so glad she bravely went there, right? So she says, recently I found myself feeling guilt about my happiness after a small weight loss.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I mean, there's so much harm that is done around oppressing and policing bodies around thinness. And it's overwhelming, and it was here before we were born. And sadly, I don't see diet culture going away completely in our lifetime. I mean, I would love that, but when something that's been around since the 1800s, that we can even trace, we still have a very long way to go. But anyway,
and it's part of being in a capitalist society.
That's true.
So, everything boils down to that ultimately. So go ahead.
power, control, and ain't nobody going to give that up is the bottom line. We'll just repackage it, like, Noom, it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle. Oh, wait, X number of calories,
Right.
But anyway, in Patricia's essay, adding color to the story, it wasn't from a diet. It wasn't from exercise. I'd left a demoralizing work situation and dropped some of the weight I'd gained due to stress. So, like, clinically, I would recognize that as weight cycling, and that our bodies do cycle in weight. There's no one set number. Like, that is a diet culture myth, right? There's that set number and it's never going to vary. I think bodies, it's it's all very dynamic. Right. Life is dynamic. Bodies are dynamic. And, anyway, she adds, I was happy to have lost it, but then was immediately ashamed by that feeling. I failed at body positivity. On the flip side, I understand that for some people, such as those who have or are recovering from eating disorders, being happy about weight loss can be a slippery slope, and the rush of losing that weight can send them on a downward spiral. These are the reasons why the body positivity movement needs to expand beyond an all or nothing mentality. Mm-hmm. Life is never 100% of anything.
I think that she brings something up that doesn't get talked about. I think that her voice here, and her voice broadly, I should say, challenges so much of what people who are in that nice white lady category, trying to do well, again, intent versus impact here, trying to do well, and yet being so blind to some of the issues that they simply cannot know without living that experience. And I was so appreciative that she agreed to write this. She'd actually, I had her write this because she posted something on Instagram about a book she was reading or a thought she was having about policing feelings around body positivity. And I asked her, I was like, would you ever consider writing something longer about this? And she said, well, I don't know if I really have more to say. And she certainly did. And I'm just forever grateful for that. And no, we have had many conversations back and forth about, will people be mad about this piece? Like, how are people going to react? And I kept saying, I think this is a vital piece of insight that is not being talked about and not being shared. And I think that people who are uncomfortable with it need to sit with that discomfort and figure out why it is they feel that way. Because it is likely exactly what I've been saying, that it's going to be the nice white ladies who are like, but not me, not this, not that. And it's like, yes, it is. That's okay, though. Acknowledge it and listen and do better.
Yeah, that. And it's like, there's two things I want to say. One is we got to get beyond, here I am, not super skinny, but plenty of thin privilege, white lady eating French fries, go me, right? Or like those side by side, and like this picture was taken on the same day, and look what, and there are moments where those things make an impact. But if we're really going to talk about liberation for all bodies, we have got to move beyond that. And one of the gifts, I think, of her essay is actually locating the problem in the systems and structures while holding space for individual different lived experiences. Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think that is really, really important. And she says toward the close, I don't always love my body or how my body is devalued in this society. right? But I am grateful for my body. Maybe that's where the positivity lies for those of us who feel left out of the movement. Maybe that's how we can find comfort in our relationship with our bodies. And yeah, I think a lot of people are going to react well to this essay, and where I would direct personal, introspection and insight is she's not saying anywhere, so let Noom do their thing, right?
Right.
And that's what you want to watch for, right? So I could even say in my own field, right? So dietitians, right? There's whole practice groups called weight management. Like literally that's what we teach, right? It's horrible. So we dietitians need to be asking our field to do better, right? To look at the health at every size literature, the science around the harms of centering weight loss. We need to be properly educated around helping people practice mindful self-care. Like we have so much work just to reduce the harm that we are perpetuating as a field, right? And that is real, important, meaningful work that can help to create systemic change. So if somebody's listening and it's like, yeah, so like, let me keep my weight loss program because people really do want to lose weight. Yes, that is going to be the words that they use because it's the language that we're taught. And there's something to benefit from gaining social power from not being oppressed by your body. But wouldn't it be nice to, as you work with individuals, to help them create meaningful change and protect their mental health first by not centering weight loss and watch what happens, at least in a neutral way, right? But don't be like, oh, leave me alone to sell my program. Like that, she's not asking for that at all. What she's asking for is like a yes and I think that's really powerful. I knew I was going to talk to you forever. And I literally have so many other notes of like, and there were little highlights of what I want to get out, but really quickly, fat out loud. I loved the essay about sort of like saying fat out loud as the kind of coming out, right, as an identity as a fat person. And it's a very, easy to read story. And I love that Marilyn Wan's Fatso was recommended. One of my early learnings in stopping the harm of, sort of, I knew I didn't want to do diets, but I called it healthy weight management. And I was like, nope, Rebecca, that wasn't right either. But Marilyn Wan was an early teacher of mine. And so I really appreciated learning. And then Mars Sebastian, you've got to read that essay. I'm not going to go into it. It's that you've got to get into it yourself. But there's a really important disclosure in there that I just felt I remember thinking in my mind, like, thank you for sharing that with me, Mars. Like I felt, thank you for sharing that for me. And the way Mars ended the essay, I love so much. So that's going to be my tease to make sure Mars, people get the book.
When I read her essay the first time and read the ending, I said, there were tears running down my eyes. I said that I see that 12-year-old Black girl reading that and suddenly just feeling herself so deeply. And I said, I can't think of anything more important to contribute than something like that.
It really is so valuable. And look, we've really only focused on one section of these 6 chapters, and there's so much. And so once again, the book is called Body Talk, 37 Voices Explore Our Radical Anatomy, and it's out now and available everywhere. Any sort of closing inspirations or remarks you'd like to add to today?
I do, actually. And this is something I bring up because I think it might be surprising for readers, but a number of essays in here are very, very funny. And I'm talking like laugh out loud until you hurt funny. And I bring that up because this has been the case in all 3 of my books, is that some of these writers, just the joy you will get reading their pieces is so profound and I think unexpected in many ways, because these are big, heavy topics. And yet that humor, I think, is vital for really not just hammering home the points in those pieces, but they also, I think, really amplify the quieter, the sadder, the harder pieces as well.
Thank you so much for saying that. And I agree. I think laughter is medicine, and it's, it's part of the healing, and it's a very human response. And so, yeah, I really appreciate that. And I appreciate all the work that went into the book. Once again, where can people find and follow you?
I am on Instagram as Hey Kelly Jensen, and my website is kellybjensen.com. And on there, all of my book stuff, all of my writing for various outlets is on there, as well as all of my yoga information.
That's so wonderful. I'll be sure to include all that in the show notes. And thank you again for coming on Body Kindness.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that's our show. The podcast is made possible with support from listeners. Please donate to help offset production costs at gofundme.com/bodykindness. And please rate and review the show when you have a moment. It really matters. Let's keep the conversations going on Facebook. Search Body Kindness and request to join the group for Body Kindness readers and listeners. Have a question for us to answer on a future episode? Visit bodykindnessbook.com/question. Body Kindness books and audiobooks are available wherever books are sold. To request a signed print copy, visit bodykindnessbook.com/order. For other questions about this podcast, please email info@bodykindnessbook.com.